autism is in the news so much these days as to what causes it and what doesn't cause it. What was your reason for choosing an autistic character?
I think I've always been fascinated by autistic savants, people who have extraordinary abilities in some ways and huge deficits in others. And so I was really, I've always been fascinated. I've read about them, and I've seen 60 Minutes has done shows on these people, and so I've always just been very fascinated by it. But even more so, when I was researching this, there was the idea that we all have this aptitude for incredible genius. Like this character in the book is a painter, and he's an incredible renderer. He can do anything. Usually when we draw something, we have to box something out. Well, the way these people paint is they can start with a little ear here and render the whole thing in perfect proportion, which is very strange. It's kind of a mathematical ability. But anyway, the idea is that it's our cognitive brain that kind of gets in the way of this genius. It's almost like all the other stuff that we have, the electricity that's going on in our brain is sort of preventing us from just having those the people who can give prime numbers ad infinitum, I mean, they're all, supposedly we can do this. And there was some guy in Australia who was actually trying to develop some kind of a cap that you would wear that would block some of the electrical stimulus in your brain that would allow that kind of genius to come through. Who knows? I mean, the human brain is fascinating, and they're finding out new things, neurological discoveries all the time. So but I've always been really interested in quirks of the brain. In this next book that I'm writing, I have a character who has something called synesthesia. I don't know if you've ever heard.
I don't know what that is.
It's where people's wires get crossed, and some people will see numbers associated with colors, or they'll hear music and associate it with color. In this particular case, the character is a cook, and he tastes shapes, and this is actually true. They'll taste something, and they'll have a sensation of a shape that either manifests physically or a texture in their hands, or they see it. Very strange, I've always been a big fan of Oliver Sacks, who, writes about the man who mistook his wife for a hat, writes about all these crazy afflictions. I think the human brain is fascinating.
Well, you had a good example of this in your autistic character, where he makes faces out of his food.
Well, autistic people have difficulty relating to faces, and so so this is one thing that they actually do with children sometimes, is to help them identify with the human face. So that I had actually picked that up during some research.
You did a lot of research. It's evident, because you have a lot of information and a lot of detail, and that's woven in with the novel.
Yeah. And the other kooky thing this character does is he speaks in lasts.
Yes.
Which,
How'd you find lasts?
I actually have an old friend who wrote a book of lasts. It's called The Book of Lasts. His name was Stavros Kosmopoulos.
Now tell our viewers what a last is.
Well, I'm going to have a hard time thinking of the ones in the book now, but the last Russian Tsar, the last endangered, the last endangered auk. The year the last endangered auk was, before they went extinct, when he was found. I mean, just crazy stuff. The last episode of the Brady Bunch, what year was that?
Yeah.
I mean, all kinds of just famous last things. There are websites. You can go online and Google famous lasts, and you'll come up with.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's amazing how much time people have to do things. But it was kind of fun for me with the character, because all of these last things were actually very relevant to.
Yes, he could pick out one that was relevant to the situation.
Right.
of what was going on.
Right. So you wondered how much he was picking up on, but then these last kind of let you know that he was understanding maybe more than you thought.
And that's all that he says, right?
Mm-hmm. That's how he speaks. And then the last in the book is the last. I think I can say this one. The last thing he says is the last sentence in the book, and that is, the last thing to escape Pandora's box was hope. So, it tells you
Are
what
there
the
many
book's
people who have this condition?
Well, I made that up. The last thing. That's not a condition. The autistic savants, I don't know what percentage of the population, but they're quite a few. And they're all degrees. And they're all varying degrees of functionality. I mean, certain people are quite functional in society and just have these extraordinary talents, and other people really can't do much besides, their talent. So,
now you have more than one character that has major difficulties. For instance, the guy who fell in the water off the coast of Florida.
He's an alcoholic. Mm-hmm.
He has a very complicated life.
He has a complicated life. He has the alcoholic gene, so he's always struggled with it. And then he had a sister who died at an early age, rather tragically, and just felt in his life he was struggling so much with his own alcoholism he couldn't deal with taking care of this boy. This autistic savant was his nephew, and so he really just, instead of dealing with what he should have, stepping in and taking over, he checks out. And so when we meet him, he's been gone for about 15 years, and he's just been living the life of an alcoholic, But when we meet him, he kind of literally hits bottom